are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to Jiggers' Place. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel. And let's see, I'm here every other Thursday, every other week, so we can, as the week comes to a close, have a cocktail and a schmooze. And this is my first post-Jewish holiday Jiggers' Place. I did one mid-holidays, I believe, as I recall. And so it's now we're heading into the sort of regular fall holidays. Halloween is next week, Thanksgiving next month, and on into Christmas and the New Year. So today we're going to be talking about Greek drama. And you may be thinking to yourself, isn't life dramatic enough without getting the Greeks into it? Well, maybe so, but Greek drama, the comedy, the tragedy of it, it will take us away from all the vicissitudes of contemporary life, especially when we talk about it over a cocktail. So with my cocktail co-creator, ChatGPT, I came up with a cocktail called the Tragic Chorus, and it is an Ouzo-based cocktail. So Ouzo is a very popular Greek liquor. It is not a liqueur. It is a distilled liquor, just like vodka and gin and whiskey, for that matter, and rum. In this case, it's distilled from anise. And in that respect, it's part of a larger family of liquors, including arak, which is very popular in the Middle East and Northern Africa, pastis, which is very popular in France, particularly in the south of France, and it's a wonderful beverage. It's a wonderful liquor, and also I'm sort of going up on it. Absinthe, absinthe is popular more kind of in Germany, Switzerland, and those countries. And then of course there are anise liquors as well. So they all fit into the same family. And this particular Ouzo is Ouzo by Metaxa. It happens to be certified kosher. Kosher in Greece is the certifier. But like all liquor that's not artificially flavored and colored, and you can see this is clear. It looks blue, but that's the color of the bottle. Most people hold it does not have to have a kosher certification. So that's one ingredient. And then we have some honey syrup, which is just a mixture of 50% honey, 50% water. Like all syrup, simple syrup is merely a mixture of 50% sugar, 50% water. The honey I used, I got from my friend Violet, who incidentally is also my tailor, a lovely woman. She just newlywed, and wishing her and her husband a very wonderful long life together. I saw her wedding pictures earlier today, and all we men need to be jealous. She looked like Grace Kelly, especially in one picture where she was kind of looking over her shoulder. But I digress. And then there's lemon juice. This is fresh squeezed. A little Aperol or Amaro. This is Aperol. This has a kosher certification. Aperol is a liqueur, so it does need a kosher certification if you're keeping kosher. And then some orange bitters, in this case Angostura, and I've got my lemon peel for a garnish. So we're going to start out with 1.5 ounces of Ouzo, and I've never had a cocktail made with Ouzo, so this will be This will be a nice experiment. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay. So there's our Ouzo. And then I've already measured out the honey syrup. It's half an ounce of honey syrup. Yum. And half an ounce of lemon juice. I have enough there. Yep. Oh, perfect. Okay, lemon juice. And a quarter of an ounce of Aperol. Aperol is kind of a bitter liqueur. That's why you can substitute Amaro as well. Let's see. So it's going to be about, yeah, that's about right. It has the red color, so it's going to, I think, give the drink just a little bit of a pinkish color because it's going to get diluted. Okay, and a dash of orange bitters. There we go. Okay, I already have my ice in my shaker, as you might imagine. Okay, so we're gonna shake it. The ice got a little lumpy. There. All right. And as I always mention, we're shaking it not just to mix everything, but also to let some of the water, let some of the ice dilute, and the water brings out the flavors in the various ingredients. So you see the shaker's getting nice and frosty. And that should be about good. And I've got my small rocks glass. A rocks glass is like this. It's essentially as tall as it is in circumference. Okay, you can use a coupe as well. I use coupes so often I decided to use a rocks glass this time. Pour this out. Oh, and it looks kind of like pink lemonade. That is wild. That's beautiful. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see this. See, it's got a nice pink color. And I'm gonna garnish it with a lemon twist. I'm gonna drop it in because it's such nice flavor. And here we go for the grand test. Oh yeah, it's actually, oh. You can smell the Ouzo, it's wonderful. Wow, this is a great mix of flavors. I hope you get a chance to mix the cocktails along with me. If you are wondering how to get the recipes, so all you need to do is go to my website, bemel.com, subscribe to my mailing list, and then you will get the recipes the morning of a Jiggers show. And that way you have time to sort of pull the ingredients together. But if you watch the show with any regularity, you see the kind of things I use regularly. Always keep a lemon on hand, obviously ice, just some basic bar equipment, a shaker, a mixing glass, and a strainer, and a bar spoon, and then just, you know, Angostura bitters and Angostura orange bitters. Sometimes I use fancier stuff, but almost always I'm substituting for Angostura, which is kind of the go-to bitters. And then, you know, a nice vodka, a nice gin, a nice rum, a couple of whiskeys, and you've got most of what you need. And then once in a while, you may have to pick up something else. Okay, so cheers. I'll meet you over on the couch. So I'm here. I'm surrounded by my pillows now. I've talked about this before. One of my favorite home furnishing stores went out of business, and I bought several pillows there, including these you know, spherical pillows. So this sits here. They're fun to play with, you know. What can I say? And then I was at the farmer's market last Sunday, and there's a lady there who makes vintage quilts. I'm not going to pull the quilt out. You wouldn't be able to see it anyway. But anyway, she had these vintage pillows. I'm going to hold this up real close. This one is themed for California. It's got all sorts of different California attractions. You can see Mickey Mouse, that's Disneyland. And here's the Santa Barbara Mission, where when I graduated from high school, we had a service, and oil fields in Bakersfield, and Yosemite National Park, and the Capitol, and the Redwoods, all these things. So if you get to the Mar Vista farmer's market, look for, she's not there every week, but look for the lady who sells the vintage quilts. Her name is, I think it's Elizabeth. I'm hoping I'm remembering it correctly. And you can tell her, hey, I saw you on Jiggers' place, Kevin's show, and she'll go, Kevin, who's that? If she saw me, she would remember me, but she would probably wouldn't remember my name. Anyway, okay. First of all, another sip of cocktail. Gosh, it's a really great mix of flavors, because you get the tartness and the sweetness of the lemon and the honey syrup first, and you get the finish of the anisette of the Ouzo. So good. Okay, so Greek dramas. These are most of my Greek dramas, and you can see they include Euripides and Sophocles and Aeschylus. This is the Oresteia, which is his most famous. Here's Euripides. I have 2 and 4. There's obviously a 1 and a 3, and actually a 5. And then these are the complete plays of Aristophanes. So, these aren't all of the Greek drama, or the Greek dramatists, but these are the best known among them. And I just for a moment, there's so many great editions out there. So the Loeb Classical Library, that's what this is. You see in the green covers. They do not only the Greek dramas, they did, all the great works of the Western canon. They were originally published in 1911, so over 100 years ago. They're very small, they're easy to travel with, which I think was part of the point of them, because, back 100 years ago, people would read and reread the classics, and so it was really handy to, for them to be small. And you'll notice that on one side is English and on the other is the original Greek. So these are really wonderful editions. You can, I don't think they're still in print, but you can still find them on Amazon. And then this is just a paperback. I got this when I was in, I think, junior high school. This is the complete plays of Sophocles. Sophocles wrote more than 120 plays, only 7 have survived. So then this is another series called The Complete Greek Tragedies. And if you look on the back, this shows you all the different ones. This may be too hard to read, but Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. There's 2 volumes of Aeschylus, 2 of Sophocles, and 4 of Euripides. So I have Aeschylus 1, and I have Euripides, I mentioned 2 and 4. These are also, really great. They're small. Because they're paperback, they're lightweight. They're easy to read. And they typically have an introduction by an academic who knows them well. I got these in junior high or high school as well. And then this is a more contemporary edition. This is the complete works of Aristophanes. It's part of the New American Library, which also, like the Loeb Classical Library, they don't do just the Greek dramas, but all a wide range of books in the in the Western canon. But this is also a nice addition. It's a little big for traveling, even though even paperback, it's still kind of heavy for traveling. But it's nice to have all the plays, and if you want to read all of them, this is a relatively inexpensive alternative as opposed to buying them, 2 or 3 at a time, which is more expensive. We have to buy more books. And I read this. This is just a few months ago. I think I got Aristophanes. So that's the bibliophile side of me, is all these beautiful books. I will say, if I had room in my library, I would get mostly the Loeb Classical Library editions. These are so beautiful. They're so well done. I love little books that I can throw in my suitcase when I travel, and starting to do a little more traveling now. And they're just so beautifully done. The translations are not going to seem as accessible to the modern ear, but from my perspective, Greek drama was written, over 2,000 years ago. So I don't know if it should sound right to the contemporary ear, because I doubt that even in the idiom of the day, Greek sounded the way we speak English. So I'm going to talk about several of the most well-known Greek dramas and comedies. So you get a little bit of a feeling of the variety, the depth, and just how wonderful these plays are. So I think I'm going to talk about 8 of them. Yeah, I've got 8. And let's see, I don't think I have any. Oh, yeah, I do have Euripides. Yeah, so I think these are all ones that I've read, but there are others. These are probably the best known. So let's start out with Sophocles, okay, and talk about the play Oedipus Rex. Of course, Rex means king, and the plot is that King Oedipus seeks to rid Thebes of a plague. Thebes was a city in ancient Greece. Only discover that he has unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. Now, that's where you, if you've ever heard of the Oedipus complex, for a boy who's just infatuated with his mother, that's where that comes from. It comes from Oedipus Rex. So the themes of the play are fate versus free will, right? This is a discussion that continues to this time. Okay, so Oedipus Rex was written, in the 5th century BCE, before the Common Era. So we're talking 2,500 years ago. This theme was, or this play was written, and the theme of the play, fate versus free will, is still discussed today. And the reason I can say that is because I have periodic discussions about this with my friend Michael, and we are just reflective, I think, of an issue that it continues to be debated, in the current times. Okay. Also, knowledge versus ignorance, and guilt and responsibility, right? So without getting into the details of the play, none of these plays are very long. If you can imagine, this book is about 250 pages, and there's 7 plays in it. So, you're talking about 35 pages per play, essentially. So you can see they're not very long, which is also one of the things that makes them so fun to read, is you can read one of these plays in an hour. Okay, so very, very fast. And
if you can imagine, a man who unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother, how he would feel, what he might do. So all of those emotional issues are dealt with in the play. And Oedipus Rex stands as an archetypal tragedy in drama to this day. Now, I would venture to say there's not many people to whom it's happened that they, God forbid, kill their father and marry their mother. Nonetheless, tragedy is a factor of human existence, and so to read about how King Oedipus deals with this grave tragedy gives us insight into how we might deal with a situation where we do something and as a result feel guilty, or we do something and perhaps struggle with the demand or need to take responsibility for our action. And this is why these plays remain relevant today. Okay, so that's Oedipus Rex. Also in Sophocles, Antigone, right? These names, by the way, they redound throughout literature. Another reason to read Greek plays is because you will find throughout the Western canon and even in contemporary literature allusions or even direct references to characters, plots, etc., that are a part of Greek drama. So in Antigone, Antigone is a woman. Don't know if that would be obvious from the name, but she is. So she defies King Creon and buries her brother according to divine law, facing death as a punishment. So again, I want to get into all the fine points of the plot, but for King Creon did not want Antigone's brother buried with the proper ceremonies surrounding a funeral and death. And Antigone, who dearly loved her brother, but not in any weird way, as my dear Marie would say, wanted to honor her brother with a proper burial. And so, on pain of execution, she nonetheless buries her brother with the proper ceremony. So, one of the enduring themes, again, I think is current today as it was 2,500 years ago, is moral duty versus the law of the state, right? I think we often make an equivalence between the two. If it's legal, it must be moral. If it's illegal, it must be immoral. But as I've talked about in one of the shows, one of the episodes of Jiggers' Place, moral and legal are not the same thing. There are oftentimes things that are legal that are immoral, and there are things that are illegal that they're not, certainly not immoral. Okay, let's see, things that are legal that are immoral. Prostitution, okay, pornography. These are immoral, but prostitution is illegal, but pornography is legal, but it is immoral, especially when you consider that oftentimes the women are not really aware of what they're doing, or they're being taken advantage of, that sort of thing. So legal but immoral, illegal but moral would be, for example, cigarette smoking isn't completely illegal, but there's nothing immoral about smoking cigarettes. It's unhealthy, to be sure, but it's not immoral. But in many places, cigarette smoking is essentially outlawed. So I was at SoFi Stadium on Sunday, and there is no place in the stadium where smoking is allowed. Now, that's not technically that's not illegal because it's not a state law that does that. That's the policy of the facility. But in many ways, state governments have been pressing to make smoking sort of quasi illegal. Prohibition was a case where something was made illegal, liquor and drinking, that was not immoral. Now, one might argue drinking to excess and the things that happen as a result of somebody being drunk are immoral. I think that's a good point to discuss. That's a bourbon conversation, as I say. But there's nothing inherently immoral about drinking. In fact, if you look at the Bible, oftentimes characters drink wine, and for very good reasons, right? So it's a contemporary issue, even as it was discussed 2,500 years ago. Okay, and then there's other issues like loyalty, Antigone being loyal to her brother, and civil disobedience, which again, she, in being loyal to her brother, she was being civilly disobedient, right? Because King Creon didn't want her to do it. And in a monarchy, what the king wants is law, basically. And again, we can see this issue of civil disobedience going on today, whether it was the BLM riots, whether it's the No Kings protests, all these things. There are people who say that they're that they're absolutely necessary, and there are people who will say that they're they're illegal, they're destructive, right? So are they civil disobedience, or are they rioting, right? Do they start out one and cross over into another? So all of those issues remain current today. And so Antigone represents an early exploration of ethical conflict, early in the Western canon, and you'll hear this numerous times in this show. It is absolutely timeless. Okay, and it really remains a cornerstone of political and philosophical discussions. Okay, so that's Sophocles. I think those are the only two I'm going to talk about from Sophocles. Yes. Okay. So next we're going to move on to Euripides. Right? I can never hear Euripides' name with. There's I believe it's a Marx Brothers joke. Euripides, what? Euripides pages out of the book, right? So, big fan of them of the Marx Brothers. So, okay, so in Euripides, Medea, again, one of the best known plays of Euripides, and Medea, who again is a woman, she's betrayed by her husband Jason, and she exacts revenge through murder. Hang on to your seat here, including her own children. Okay, so the themes: betrayal, revenge, and the extremes of love and passion, right? Look, unfortunately, we still hear about cases today of mothers murdering their children, perhaps among the most heinous crimes that we can think of, right? And Medea explores the mindset of a woman who is essentially driven to rage by her husband's betrayal and what it causes her to do. And again, how many of us get through life without being betrayed, right? How many of us, having been betrayed, have not at least felt the desire for revenge? Although, God forbid, revenge like Medea took it. And so, again, there's a timelessness to the issues discussed in this play. So Medea is shocking. It was shocking even by the stand, even in at the time it was written, and the psychologically complex tragedy of Medea is it was the case then. It remains the case now, and then you know, we tend to think of, and it is the case that most often murder is a crime committed by men, but it is not solely committed by men. And there have been a number of famous female murderers throughout history, right? And so while women, at least used to be, referred to as the gentler sex, you know, beware a woman crossed, I think. Okay, so that's Medea. And then also in Euripides is the Bacchae. So King Pentheus resists worship of Dionysus, who, among other things, is the god of wine, okay, leading to his destruction by frenzied followers, right? And the themes of the Bacchae are order versus chaos, the issue of divinity, godliness, if you will, human repression, and ecstasy, right? So all of these are tied together by King Pentheus's trying to figure out what he wants and should do in the face of a restive population. So it really, like really all of the Greek plays, the Bacchae delves deeply into the psychological nature of human beings, the psychological nature of relationships in life, right? So long before there was a Sigmund Freud and other writers on psychiatry and psychology, the Greeks were examining how human beings face the challenges of life. And they were really delving into all of these aspects, okay? The other theme of the Bacchae is the consequences of defying so-called, the so-called divine, right? So we see a similar theme in the Bible, of course. Now, the Greeks, they were not a biblical people in ancient Greece, but they were exploring at least some of the same ideas that are explored in the Old Testament, right? And so it's having raised that, it's an interesting sort of factoid, as we call them, that in traditional Judaism, when the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, what Christians call the Old Testament, what Jews call the Hebrew Bible. So when reading the weekly portion of the Torah on Saturday, in order for that reading to fulfill what's called halacha, which is loosely translated Jewish law, the reading has to be done in Hebrew, because that is the language in which it was written. However, there is one language in which it can be read, one language other than Hebrew, in which it can be read that will still fulfill the mitzvah, the rules, if you will, and that is Greek. The Greek language was considered so beautiful by the rabbinic authorities at that time that they permitted a reading to be done in Greek and still be considered to fulfill the commandment. So today, to read the Torah portion in English by traditional Judaism would not fulfill the mitzvah. Okay, but to this day, Hebrew and Greek would. Okay, so that's Euripides. All right, next, Aeschylus. Okay, and first of all, there's we're going to talk about Agamemnon. Okay, Agamemnon was a king, and you notice there's a lot of characters who are kings in Greek literature. That's because most of the little city states in Greece were at least initially ruled by kings. Democracy came on later in the Greek period. Okay, so King Agamemnon is returning from the Trojan War, and he is murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, as revenge for having sacrificed their daughter. So, if you're familiar with the Bible, of course, there's what's known as the Akedah Yitzchak, where Abraham is called by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. He takes him up on the mountain and is prepared to do so, but God stays his hand. So this was a lesson that God wanted to teach about the desirability of sacrificing one's children. And it's a similar theme taken up in Agamemnon. Okay. Was Aeschylus familiar with Hebrew scripture? I don't know. I'm not enough of an Aeschylus scholar to tell you that, but it is an interesting sort of parallel. And I will add, by the way, that it's thought that the reason Sarah, Abraham's wife, died when she did was because the Sutton told her that Abraham had successfully sacrificed their son. And she was so distraught at the thought that she died. Now, of course, the Sutton, Satan, he oftentimes tells lies to accomplish his desires, right? And that was the case there. Okay, so the themes of Agamemnon: justice, revenge, fate, and the so-called cycle of violence, right? What does Agamemnon's wife accomplish by murdering her husband? It's not going to bring her son, right? He still remains dead, right? So it examines all of those ideas, and you can see revenge is kind of it's a theme of a number of the Greek dramas, because it is such a human desire, the desire for revenge, that people really, we today need to understand, what do we do with that? Okay? What do we do with the desire to, kind of give as good as we've gotten? Okay. Can a society based on revenge survive, right? And that's it. Like, again, it's sort of one of the broader themes of Greek drama, and it is one of the themes in Agamemnon. So the significance of Agamemnon is it is the first play in the Orestia trilogy, right? So and that's I mentioned before. This is the Orestia. It's a group of 3 plays: Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and Eumenides. Okay, those are the 3 plays, and it's really a foundational work in terms of Western jurisprudence and the concept of tragedy in Western writing. Can't get over how good that cocktail is. Right, so that's Aeschylus. And then the other Aeschylus play I want to talk about is Prometheus Bound. Now you may say, wait a minute, isn't that a book by like Ayn Rand or somebody? or is it Ayn Rand? There is another book called Prometheus Bound, but it was originally the title of a Greek play by Aeschylus. It's not in the Orestia. It's in one of his other plays. One of the other four plays extant of Aeschylus. Okay, so the plot: Titan Prometheus is punished by Zeus, who's of course the head of all the gods, for giving fire to humanity, and he suffers yet remains defiant, right? And again, you can see some common themes here. So first of all, there's the theme of defiance, like with Antigone, right? And knowledge versus authority, suffering, foresight, right? Was it a good idea for humanity to get fire? What have we done with it? On par, it would appear that we've done more good with it than evil. But I think, there would be some people who would debate that. And again, let's grab a bourbon and let's talk about it. But all of those themes are explored in Prometheus Bound. And its significance is it stands as a symbol to the resistance of human progress. So the Luddites probably find a lot with which to relate in Zeus, who is devoted to keeping humans as his playthings, as opposed to letting human society progress and evolve. Okay, and it explores the sort of divine human conflict. Now, of course, the Greek perception of gods is very different than that in the Jewish, Christian, Muslim world. Greece was not a monotheistic culture; it was a polytheistic culture. There's a whole pantheon of gods. Nonetheless, certainly it's the case with Judaism and Christianity, and I believe it's the case with Islam as well. We are adjured to create a personal relationship with God. And that's a hard thing to do with a non-corporeal entity, right? God has no body. God has no sex. Even though we speak to him as he sometimes, although in Judaism certainly there's a she aspect of God, or what's referred to in the feminine aspect of God. So how do we create a relationship with the Almighty? And I think we can gain some insights from Greek plays, and especially from Prometheus Bound. Okay, and then okay, so that's the third of our authors. And then last is Aristophanes. Now, I've been talking about dramas. Aristophanes wrote comedic Greek plays. So if you're a little concerned about reading something heavy, start out with Aristophanes. He is hilarious. By the standards of today, he is hilarious. He's clever, both in language and in plot. Just marvelous comedy here. So there's Lysistrata is the first of the two I'm going to talk about. So with the women, led by Lysistrata, decide to withhold sex to force their men to end the Peloponnesian War. Brilliant, right? And the battle of the sexes continues to this very moment, right? It started 2,500 years ago, still going on today. So the themes are, of course, war and peace, right? The Peloponnesian War, bloody war, horrible, and went on for a long, long time. Okay, power between the sexes, and also it's a satire of politics, right? And a lot of the comedy comes from that satire. Now, you don't have to know a whole lot about how Greek city-states were governed to appreciate the satire, because again, it's satirizing politicians and people in positions of power, governments and power, and we have all that today, right? And so you can well appreciate the humor in Lysistrata. Okay, so uh, you know, if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll dip my toe into the water of Greek plays, start with Lysistrata. Okay, and I think you will enjoy it. You may even get hooked on it, and then you'll be motivated to read others. And then the final play I'm going to talk about is The Clouds, also by Aristophanes. And again, it's a comedy. So Strepsiades enrolls his son in Socrates's thinkery. Isn't that a great word? Thinkery, right? To avoid debt, leading to chaos and a satire of intellectual pretensions. Seen any pretentious intellectuals of late? I mean, come on. Again, 2,500 years ago today, too many intellectuals are extraordinarily pretentious, right? And so Aristophanes pokes jabs at them. You don't need to know what did Socrates, how did Socrates behave? What was his? You don't need to know any of it. There are pompous intellectuals today, just like there was in ancient Greece. So the themes of The Clouds: education, reason versus folly, and generational conflict between the father and son, right? Again, generational conflict is as old as human existence. And one doesn't have to have any knowledge of Greek society to appreciate the humor that comes out of the interactions between Strepsiades and his son. So The Clouds is one of the earliest surviving Greek comedies, critiquing philosophical and governance trends in Athens. And Aristophanes won several awards in his day for his plays. He was bitingly satirical about other playwrights that were popular during, contemporary to him. It's also very, very funny because this sort of rivalry among creatives, again, it goes on today, and you don't need anything about any of the other writers to appreciate how one writer will want to egregiously satirize his competitors. So I just want to wrap up real quickly by talking about, or summarizing really, the kind of thematic issues with which Greek plays deal. And we talked about some of them, but I made some notes about others. I want to make sure I cover them for you. So first of all, it is a timeless exploration of human nature. We talked about that already. It's a source of moral and ethical reflection, and we talked about that as well. The idea of fate versus responsibility. We mentioned, I think, in one of the plays, but that is a broader theme. Another is Greek plays, both comedies and dramas, really stand as the foundation for Western theater. So if you enjoy any kind of theater, whether it's contemporary musical theater, classical musical theater, dramas. I talked about I talked about one particular play not too long ago, Waiting for Godot, right? It was very contemporary for its time, very different than traditional drama. If you like any of those, Greek theater is their antecedent. And so it will dramatically enrich your enjoyment of these other forms of theater by reading and understanding some aspects of Greek theater. Okay, it gives political and social insight. We were just talking about the clouds. You can see from the earliest period of Greek theater that was the case. Psychological depth, I mentioned that. Okay, and this is I haven't mentioned this yet, and that's why I want to make sure I cover my list. Is I think we gain some cultural and historical appreciation. So I was talking to a friend of mine who was telling me that he only reads nonfiction, and I think that's a shame. Not that there's anything wrong with reading nonfiction. It's great to read nonfiction. It's great to read history, but historical nonfiction doesn't give us a complete picture of how people live their lives, behave, just how they were. Okay, and Greek theater fills in a part of the cultural and historical picture that built Western society in a way that nonfiction cannot. Okay? Because Greek drama and comedies deal with the emotional, the spiritual, and they're seeking emotional and spiritual psychological depth. So they really expand our understanding in a way that nonfiction just cannot. And then finally, much of theater is about technique. The entering and exiting of the actors and actresses, of how props and scenery work, of how the stage is set, all of these kind of things. And again, for anyone, and this may be you, who enjoys theater, or maybe like me, you're passionate about theater, to have a sense of how the conventions of theater were built makes our appreciation of it even deeper. And those conventions have as their foundation Aristophanes and Aeschylus and Euripides and Sophocles. And so I encourage you to read some Greek theater. Like I said, start with Lysistrata, maybe go from Lysistrata to the clouds, and then having a couple of comedies under your belt, then start looking at some dramas. Unless you really want to, like, you want a meaty sandwich in which to indulge. So then start with the dramas. But I can't encourage you enough to give Greek theater a try. And if you have a chance to see it performed, go. That's all I can tell you is go. I've been looking around for opportunities to see it here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is not a huge theater town the way, for example, New York is. But I'm looking for opportunities to go. I've only seen, I think, 1 or 2 Greek plays performed in the theater. I'm thinking about talking to a friend of mine who's a theater director and seeing if there's some way we can do some of these plays or something so people can see them. But that's a discussion for another day. So a toast to Greek theater. A toast to this cocktail, and a toast to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I wish you a lovely rest of the evening, a restful and restorative weekend, and I hope to see you next week on my other shows, and signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my belle. Courage at all times, my friends.